Mr. Kelly, do you want to take a quick break before we move on, or how do you want to handle the rest of the meeting?
I think that'd probably be helpful.
All right, let's take about a 5 or 10 minute break. Thank you. Okay, I've been told that the audience cannot hear us talking very well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We can start saying bad things and you won't know what we're saying that. Okay. All right, thank you. We're going to move on to the item number 13, which is the approval of the 3 agreements between IID and Sea Solar IV South LLC for its energy generation projects. We're going to take them individually. A is access license agreement, B is transmission crossing license agreement, and C is generation tie line enhancement agreement. So, Mr. Kelly?
Director Menville, I guess I'll handle this. Jeff Garber, General Counsel. This is an issue that we took up for action back on February 24th. At that time, the board approved these 3 agreements, and staff was tasked with the process of completing all the exhibits. In the process of completing all the exhibits, we slightly revised the agreements. We decided to bring the full package back to the board for approval. Attached to the agenda memo are the 3 agreements, and they're redlined to show the changes. The only changes are either to reflect the fact that an exhibit was no longer non-existent or incomplete, it was finalized, to fix 1 or 2 typos, and also to add a few pieces of language that are actually helpful to the district that were negotiated during the time period between the time the board last meet and the time that these documents were finalized. And I do want to point out a couple of those items. I'd be happy to start at the beginning and to go through these projects in detail. I'm just not sure whether the board wants me to do that or not.
I would like to see what was changed from
Yes, ma'am.
today to the previous contracts.
If you look at the 2 agreements, I'm going to go through them one at a time, and I'm going to show you the significant changes. The first agreement is the access license agreement.
Give me the page number.
Yes, ma'am. And the access license agreement is the document in which Sea Solar is provided access to the portion of the West Side Main ditch bank for use in construction and maintenance of their project. They pay for that access. They pay to improve that roadway. And all 3 of these agreements are connected through cross-default and cross-consideration provisions, so they're essentially one agreement. But if you look at the accessway agreement, which starts on page 160, and I didn't include the exhibits to the agreement, although the board was given full copies. The documents were put on the website when the agenda was posted, and there were a couple copies over on the table over there, and I have a copy. There are some changes that were done just to reflect that documents were completed. For existence, at page 162, number 8, that document was provided, so it was no longer required to be provided in the future. That's the same thing about page 169. Because of the passage of time, the reference to a potential start date on April 1st was deleted. The same thing on page 170. Also, language is added here, which I think is important, at the bottom of page 169, that says that Sea Solar will pay all outside counsel fees for the assistance of the preparation and negotiation of all 3 agreements. These agreements proved to be very time-consuming to negotiate and prepare, beyond my wildest dreams as far as the amount of time that was involved. And Sea Solar agreed to pay any outside counsel fees that were involved. And that offer stands even if they're not able to move forward with financing on the project. That covers the changes to the ALA. If we go to the TCLA, which is the next document, that's page 188. That's the document that gives Sea Solar a right to build a temporary line, which we call the Southern Path. And I brought a whole bunch of drawings and diagrams, which I can show on the projector, but again, I didn't know how much time the board wanted me to spend with this. We spent about an hour on it last time. This agreement, there were some mild changes as well, reflecting the fact that exhibits which weren't in final form now were in final form. For example, at the top of page 136, those documents now exist. I don't know that there's much else with the TCLA. And then there is an important change to the GEA. That's the third document.
What page?
Well, the GEA starts on page... Starts on page 252, and one of the most important changes is on page 263. You'll recall that in conjunction with the discussion about the MOU, Mr. Kissinger talked about what we're calling the speed limit. There are two limitations that we're placing on the transmission of energy in this general area. One is that on the north crossing, which is the crossing where all three of these projects are eventually going to be sending their generation, there's an 800 megawatt limit. The second limit is that on the Gentile line, IID is going to build this line as a contractor and then turn it over to C Solar. The purpose of this line is so C Solar can transmit energy north to Drew Sub, from Drew Sub across the West Side Main to Ivy Sub. There's a 585 megawatt limitation on that line, and you'll see the language for that was added on page 263 at paragraph 60, and that very lengthy language essentially says, and this again is consistent and parallel with the language in the MOU, if IID gets everything it wants out of the MOU and the definitive agreement that's prepared after the MOU, then we'll enlarge that to the capacity of the line. If we don't get everything we want, we won't. So with this 585 megawatt limitation on the north-south Gentile line and the 800 megawatt limitation on the crossing, we've at least capped the size of projects that can be developed as a basis of these actions that we're taking. It doesn't stop everything, but it does put a limit on it, and it's a limit that's enforceable because of the way it's been designed.
More or less?
Excuse me?
What's the megawatts? About
The total
1,600?
megawatts that could be transmitted over the north-south line and across the West Side Main Canal at the North Crossing is 800 megawatts. And as we understand it, that would be energy from the LS Power or the Centinela project, the C Solar project, and some of the energy depending on how large the AES project eventually is developed. And before you make any nasty comments about these developers, I do want to let you know that there are representatives that I see.
I know they're there. That's why I'm talking the
From
way I'm
C Solar, I see
talking. Don't you tell me how to
representatives from
talk. Don't you
AES.
put words in my mouth.
And I don't know that there's anybody from LS.
If they don't know me by now, they'll never know me.
But there are some other comments in the GEA, again, to reflect the fact that at the time, a lot of these exhibits were going to be produced after the documents were signed, but during the passage of time, we got them all done, so that's not necessary anymore.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to go into as much
Jeff,
detail as the board wishes.
Yeah, Jeff, I have a question. Do you want A, B, and C passed individually, or how do you want to handle this?
The documents have no value if they're passed individually. You can either approve or not approve them, but you should take them all as a whole. They really are essentially one document that's interrelated.
That's fine. I will vote on them as a whole, A, B, and C as one document. That's what I wanted to know. Okay, are you finished with what you have to say?
If there are any questions, I'd be happy to address
I don't
them.
know
I
if
have
the board
drawings
has
and
any
diagrams.
questions.
I just know we
Dr.
spent a lot of
Hanks?
time
I
on
just
this.
have one question I need
Yes, sir.
clarification on. In the event that the MOU fails, then the limitations on the crossing, because I think we can just take these all unless the audience has some question. If the MOU failed, is there sufficient controls in to contain, or are those controls lost?
When you say the MOU fails, what do you mean?
There's no
Well, if-
PPTO.
No PPTO?
Yes.
If there's no PPTO, the backstop is going to be some type of sharing arrangement with San Diego. We're going to have an 800 megawatt limit. That's enforceable contractually. That's what's there. If the PPTO is not obtained, there's going to have to be some fallback position with San Diego, and it's going to be some type of sharing of Drew Sub. In the agreement with LS Power and in the agreement with San Diego, there's going to be some arrangement for a fallback position. I don't know if Mr. Kissinger wants that, if that's sufficient.
Mr. Kissinger, would you address that, please?
Agreements still need to be negotiated with SDG&E. The way it's set up right now, the backstop limitation on transmitting over the West Side main stays in effect, or unless IID is otherwise satisfied in some fashion. The way we've drafted the documents, SDG&E would be the owner of the Drew sub, and we wouldn't have an option to take ownership or half ownership of it, as the MOU contemplates, until that facility becomes a network facility. So, and that's largely a financial issue. I didn't want to put IID in a position to have to pay for this facility until it had a different revenue source to offset the cost of buying it from SDG&E. So the short answer is, unless we negotiate something different in the definitive agreements, which we can do, it would remain in SDG&E's ownership, the Drew sub, but it would be of limited utility, both because it's landlocked all around it by solar facilities and because they wouldn't be able to put more than the 800 megawatts across the West Side main.
The other issue is that we're assuming that this project moves forward, we would move forward to start negotiating the crossing agreement with Ellis Power for the Centinela project. And again, we're going to install that 800 megawatt limitation. LS will obtain that license. They'll assign it to San Diego Gas and Electric. And we may be able to put some limitations on Drew Sub there, and those limitations will be assigned to San Diego Gas and Electric.
Maybe we will.
Well, the way I've looked at it is that we can put certain limitations on what we give LS, and they can sign to San Diego. To the extent that the MOU or the definitive agreement is successful in getting us what we need, some of those issues can be lifted. I'm sure that's going to be the next argument that we're going to have with San Diego, because we're using these individual solar projects as a step-by-step method of trying to protect ourselves with the leverage that we have as we go along. The fact that everything's been compressed together so we have a better idea of where the MOU is going has been somewhat helpful, and it's reflected in some of these changes you see in the Sea Solar project contracts.
Further questions for discussion? Go ahead, Drew.
Just couldn't help yourself.
Thank you, Mr. President. Drew Fossum, General Counsel of Sea Solar. It's a very, very important question Director Hanks asked, and I just want to second what Jeff said and give my perspective on that. Whatever happens to the MOU, if that fails or the definitive documents don't get completed or something goes haywire there, we have a binding contractual commitment to enforce that 585 megawatt limit on the Gentai. And if we breach that for some reason, we forfeit not only our encroachment permit, but we will essentially give back to the district that 1.3 mile line that we paid $2.6 million for. So you've got a very, very effective enforcement tool over us. And at least for the south and east part of the neighborhood from that Drew substation, we're sort of the blocking mechanism to help you enforce what you're trying to accomplish.
All right, thank you, Drew. Thank you, Drew. Any further questions? Well, I'd like to entertain a motion on these three items together.
I'll make a motion to approve the three agreements between IID, Sea Solar, IV South, LLC for its energy generation project for A, access license agreement, B, transmission crossing license agreement, C, generation tie line enhancement agreement.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, it's been moved and second. Any discussion by the board on this? Dr. Hanks, you have anything? No. Okay, any of the other board members? Anybody from the audience want to speak to this issue? Yes, sir. State your name for the record.
Good afternoon, President and board members. My name is Nick Segura. I am the Assistant Business Manager of International Brotherhood Electric Workers Local 569, representing Imperial and San Diego counties. I know many of you are familiar with the work we are doing here in Imperial County to make sure renewable energy projects are being built by local residents and to train local residents for these green economy jobs. The Sea Solar South project by Tenaska and First Solar is a very important project for us. Now that the work is winding down at the IID's Unit 3 and the Sun Peak Solar project in Nyland, we have a lot of electricians, electrical apprentices that are here training right now in the community facing unemployment. The good news is that the Sea Solar South project has broken ground and could keep these local electricians and apprentices working so they could feed their families and pay their mortgages and rents. The other reason that this project is critical is to allow us to continue the on-the-job training that we do with our apprentices so they can learn their trade We understand this project needs certain approvals today in order for the construction to keep moving forward. We respectfully request the board to grant Sea Solar South the necessary approvals so that we can keep local electricians and apprentices employed here in the county, in the community. Thank you.
How many local jobs are we talking about?
It kind of depends on the schedule of the project, but we kind of do like a one guy per watt. So, if it's a 50, for example, the Nyland job, it's like a 25 megawatt. They generally have 25 electricians. I'm just talking electricians working there all the time. Sometimes they might go up to 40 or 50. Kind of depends on the schedule and the aggressiveness of the schedule to, the timeline. So,
do you know, Drew?
I do. Thank you.
Thank
Do
you.
you have any more questions?
No, that's it.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Go on, Drew.
That was an accurate answer in terms of IBEW members, but in terms of the aggregate employment at the site, we've got about 50 to 60 people down there right now working, and that's about 50 to 60% local, is my understanding. At full employment, after we close financially and we ramp it all the way up, we'll have between 300 and 350 people on site, and the local percentage will go up to 80%-ish or so. Now, permanent employees, a lot less than that after construction is complete. But again, our project, the Sea Solar South project that's before you today, is a 130 megawatt project. Out of the 800 or so that's in that south and east of the IV neighborhood, you can kind of gross up the 300 to 350 jobs up to 800 megawatts and get at least a ballpark of the construction jobs alone. And that's each project 18 to 24 months. Sequenced behind each other. It's a very substantial number of jobs just for our little corner of the county down there. You may know my company is also working on another project, our West project, that would feed into this new switch yard that's north and I guess it's due north of the IB sub. That's a 150 megawatt-ish project, so 350, maybe pushing 400 jobs for that one, and you can kind of do the math and extrapolate from there. But the union electrical folks are just one piece of the overall employment pie.
Okay, thank you.
I also have a letter here from the Board of Supervisors that was passed today in support of the MOU with San Diego and in support of this Sea Solar project to be passed here today. Is there any other comments from the public? Okay, please vote. All right, thank you. We're going to move on to item number 14, which is approval of the affected system agreement related to the Sea Solar IV South LLC and Sea Solar 4 East LLC project.
Directors, if you remember 2 weeks ago, I gave a presentation on the affected system studies process in general.
And I questioned your studies. And I continue to question them.
Fire away, Director Mendoza. This is one of those in particular that we did complete the affected system study for. It's part of the 1,367 megawatts. We determined through the study process that there was in fact system impacts from the combination of the projects coming in together, and so we elected to study these projects more or less as a clustered group. So the determination that we came up with was that Tenaska Sea Solar, in fact, was allotted a percentage of the impacts that they cause on the system, roughly 14% of that total. And then we allocated costs to these projects of $400,000 for system operating procedures. And these are temporary mitigations that we need until we get the actual network upgrades in place. So the operators.
So what are we talking about with these projects?
This was studied for the full 200 megawatts. Mm-hmm. So this project, upon completion and final approval, would be fully mitigated.
So to what number now?
So the system operating procedures themselves are running $400,000. We determined that there is an impact to the Coachella Valley 125 MVA 161 kV to 92 kV transformer, and their allotment for that is $901,000.
Total cost? Total amount?
For these guys is 2.9 million.
I agree with that number. Mr. Kelly, do you?
The 2.9 million that the impact study says is the right amount has been double checked by a second engineer that was obtained through Mr. Kissinger He did have a number of questions about the underlying assumptions that our staff made, but he did come down on the side of the overall amount being adequate to mitigate both reliability and financial impacts.
And just for the record, this is a percentage of the total cost of the impacts. The rest of the percentages will be borne by the other interconnectors that are part of this 800 megawatt mix that we have.
No, the
or in general, excuse me, I'm sorry, Ms. Garber. In general, the people that can connect anywhere along the system that have an impact that are included in that 1,367 megawatts.
Was there some reason they weren't studied altogether as a single cluster? And what I'm getting at, are we asking Sea Solar to pay more, and then the next day there'll be less impacts because of the amount they put up? Why weren't they studied all as a whole?
You're asking about the cumulative impact of all these megawatts. I believe that the rationale is that each one of these projects stands alone and is judged on its merits as far as its impacts on our system.
Go ahead, Joel.
Actually, we took a look at the projects, not all of them because some came along sooner in time for the ones that we know about. But the 1,367 megawatts we did lump into a bucket and say, you guys are causing a problem collectively, and we're going to spread the costs out to you individually based on the percentage of the issues that they cause. This particular project is causing roughly 14% of that total. So the other projects, as they come along, will pick up their percentage in the same fashion.
If you look at Appendix A to this agreement, which is the agreement between IID and Sea Solar, in which Sea Solar agrees to put up funds.
That's page 331.
Comply with certain requirements so that we can build and implement the requirements based on the study, you'll see where that percentage is laid out. So Sea Solar puts up a letter of credit or cash or some other security for IID to create the SOPs necessary to protect its system. And then when IID determines it's appropriate, it moves forward and builds the improvement. But Sea Solar only has to pay a certain percentage of that improvement, which is 2 transformers identified in Appendix A, because that's what the study determined was its percentage of those transformers.
And you know how I feel about that study.
Yeah, Mr. Ivy, I know that Mr. Kelly had 2 engineers look at this. We had our staff, and then Mr. Kissinger had one of his people look at it, and they both came up with a $2.9 million. There has been some question that the cost could be higher than that, and I've spoken to. You can't hear me? Okay. There's been some question as to the cost of this project. The $2.9 million has been questioned, and so Drew, I think that you may want to speak to this issue on your letter of credit to cover if there's any additional cost on this in order to get this project built, and that if the actual cost, you get reimbursed as a credit. You want to speak to that?
The way the agreement is structured, Joel just described to you what the physical facilities the electrical engineers are that they decided would need to get built to accommodate line loading that our project would cause. And some of that alleviates line loading problems that the district has already. We're fine with that. We're happy to pay our fair share of these new facilities. But the timing on when these facilities will get built is very uncertain. We're only to pay 14% of one transformer and 24% of the other transformer. Presumably the district doesn't want to front those dollars. It'll wait until the other projects financially close as well and can pay their financial security. But as a consequence of us coming along first, we're willing to put up much more financial security than our 14% and 24% share of these facilities, up to a $7.5 million amount to make sure that the district is adequately secured. If costs increase and the actual cost comes in higher than the estimate, if because it takes years to get these built, inflation kicks in and the costs are much higher, we're willing to take that risk and stand behind those costs.
Okay, and you have something to that effect that you're going to do that then?
We'll commit to that in writing, absolutely.
And Mr. Garber's on board with that?
Do you have your letter with you today?
I do, ma'am, and I'd be glad to show you that.
Give it to Mr. Garber, please, before we vote.
Yes, I saw it, and it was in the form of a unilateral letter because I really didn't know how to incorporate it into an agreement, giving this agreement. If they want to offer...
Unless that number is incorporated into this agreement, I ain't going to vote for it.
Well,
That's exactly our intention, is
No.
to make that commitment right now and incorporate it into whatever
if you're
binding
going to
form
make
you
that
need.
commitment, 7.5
I'm making it to you
million,
right
then
now,
I'm willing
ma'am,
to
and we're
support
putting it
If
right
not,
in.
I'm going to vote no, and you can kiss your projects goodbye.
So, just so I'm clear, the agreement says what it says, but Sea Solar is offering to put up greater security for the same period of time as would be required under the agreement. And to the extent that additional funds are necessary for IID to move forward, or the actual cost of the project costs more, IID can
Draw
tap
against
into
those
that
funds.
security.
And you have that. You have that with you today.
I have a letter, and if that's
You're going to incorporate that into this
yes,
this
ma'am.
item.
And if that's the condition of your action, then what I'm going to do is make sure that the letter
Well,
states
then,
that.
Excuse me. Would you rephrase your motion to include?
I rephrase my motion to include the letter of credit from Drew to given to the
7.5.
IID of 7.5 million.
Second the motion for that.
Yeah, we
Okay.
need to enter in.
Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I've got two things. Drew, would you take wheeling credits against that 7.5? I'm just teasing you.
Not only, Director Hanks, would I take wheeling credits in return for the amount of cash that we end up paying for these facilities, but under the contract, you guys will be contractually obligated to give me wheeling credits. What I do with them, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Sell them at a discount to somebody.
I had a
within our
question for
territory.
Joe, and then I'll be finished. On the project that's hooking into the IID, what are they paying for affected study impacts? Is that available to us?
Such as the projects in the transitional cluster?
Yes.
Yes, sir. So that's the known and measured amount that we've got, the $200 million roughly in total network system upgrades for the 1225.
He's asking about the 150 megawatts that's in our queue.
Oh, their allotment was somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 million, and that includes the costs of the substations that they're connecting into. So it was actually, the network upgrade costs were about $6 for SolarGen. Okay, for that was 3 projects.
But am I asking for a comparison of apples and oranges here, or?
Why is it that Sea Solar is only
So,
being
speaking of the mic, Mr. Garber.
I don't think the mic works, but why is it that Sea Solar is being asked to pay 2.9 for a system impact, which is different than the number that someone within a known entity within our balancing authority is going to have to pay for
Connecting to us.
Connecting.
Sure. I mean, the impacts that you have depend on where you're connecting at. So if you're inside our system, you're going to have more of an impact inside our system. If you're connecting outside, it tends to be around the periphery. And so while we're seeing less of an impact from these guys, there's also the residual benefit to them of the Sunrise PowerLink line being in service, which actually tends to want to pull more of the power that direction and take a little bit off of our backs. And so the other project, the 150 megawatt project, by virtue of connecting internally in with our system, they had a measured impact on a portion of Path 42, and we just allocated a portion of that to them. And then just a couple of sundry other impacts that they had.
Okay, but now for the other projects that are going to hook up, are they going to pay a comparable amount, proportionate?
On a percentage impact basis, yes, sir. Just like these guys did, or will.
This 2.9, if that comes within range, good. But if it goes to 4, then more than likely the others, if they're 200 megawatt, they're going to pay the $4 million too.
They're going to pay pretty close to that same percentage allocation.
Okay.
Any further questions from the board?
For the question.
You had another question?
No, just vote.
Okay, please vote.
You're going to have to come over.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to item number 15. What's the execution of revised generator interconnect agreement related to Green Light Energy Corporation projects?
I move to approve.
You move to approve all three?
All 3 projects, yeah.
Okay, is there a second?
Yeah.
Okay, any discussion? Please vote. Gloria, we voted.
We voted already. Just we vote. Go ahead and vote.
Number 15.
Record the vote.
Director Hanks, you need to vote.
You want to let her
For
speak?
discussion.
You can speak.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carolyn. That's right. I'm sorry. I didn't. Got to yell at me. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Okay, I just wanted to talk, because you're talking about the revised generation interconnection agreement for Greenlight Energy, which involves the Solar Gen 2 projects. And my family farm will be affected by these projects. So I wanted to speak out in opposition against anything that has to do with them. I have great concerns for the impacts that these projects will have on our ratepayers. Solar is a way more expensive source of energy. Also, that I wanted to know whether these interconnection agreements are public information, that the public should be made aware of what kind of deal has been negotiated and whether it was done that suit the public. Also, that some of these projects on the Solar Gen 2 solar arrays will be on prime land, prime farmland, and the rest of it will be on farmland of statewide importance. This is all very valuable farmland. I know your consultant here said, the one that spoke after Mr. Kissinger, commented that, the projects in the South End needed to be approved because of the jobs that were going to be created because of them. Well, you are ignoring the fact that this will do away with long-term ag-related jobs and the ag-related businesses that are done there. Also, these projects involve IID Western Farmland that has been involved in a lawsuit for several years. In fact, another developer said that he chose not to go on the IID ground because of this lawsuit, and that he would not put his renewable energy project on there. I feel that these solar projects and others in the valley are endangering our valley water rights, as Mr. Hanks has brought up. And now you're talking about allowing water conservation for these solar projects. It's raising a huge red flag, what you're doing, and our water rights and our ratepayers need to be protected from the problems that these large-scale solar developers are creating and that the IID board has created by their decisions. So I urge you just to vote no on the interconnection agreement and give more time to do due diligence to this.
Thank you, Carolyn. Go ahead, Oscar.
Oh, my God.
My name's Oscar Gonzalez. I just came back from the Board of Supervisors. They voted 5-0, and there was about 25 people that spoke for it, and 3, I guess, farmers. Lady from Farm Bureau who is protecting her job. I don't have any allegiance myself, but this lady sounds like Chicken Little. The sky's falling, the sky's falling. People have been displaced since 1911, and the bottom line has been Mexicans, poor people. And this is the first time, I think, that you guys have an initiative. I've criticized Jim severely in Desert because nothing has been built in collection or in the sphere. And for the first time, I want to congratulate all of you, because it takes a team. And this lady and other people that are adverse are using artificial barriers. Farmers have been benefiting since 1911. Up until the 50s, you needed to be a landowner to be able to run for IID. I'm glad Estela Mendoza's here, Anthony, Fred Singh, Tony Gallegos. Someday we're going to have 5 Mexican Americans. We have them in Calexico at the school board, city council. There was a political revolution in Calexico in 1960. Luis Legaspi, Alex Rivera, Jack Ortega, Alex Campillo, my dad, Enrique Gonzalez, etc., etc. And they got the vote out because they realized that Mexican Americans, we're very proud to be Americans. And we're a community. We have integrated with Caucasians and vice versa. Jim Hanks, his daughter or son, has a son-in-law, Mexican. All of us, if we stay here long enough, we're going to be related. And
now that's pushing it a little bit, Oscar. That's pushing it.
Well, Ms. Mendoza, a lot of my relatives like you, and the vast majority like you, and you're well respected.
Well, thank you.
And I think you do a good job according to them.
But not according to you.
Well, I wouldn't say that too sarcastically. I think you've done a tremendous job. We may differ politically how to get there, but your position is a means to an end. And I respect you. We disagree because we have the right to disagree.
That's right.
Right?
That's
And the Constitution affords us that. So in conclusion, don't listen to the king babies that are saying, chicken, the sky is falling. The absentee landowners, ladies and gentlemen, are not here. They're in La Jolla, Colorado. And que bueno, that's good. If I had the money, but I've never aspired to be a millionaire, Mr. Menville. Never. I love what I do. I'm retired. And you better believe I'm working hard. And Mrs. Mendoza, right now, if there was an election, she would win hand down in collection. So would you, Mr. Menville. Because you've earned that respect. And I respect that. And you may win in June, and that's life. I'm not gonna cry. Hey, I'm a big boy, but I support the efforts because for the first time in the history of Imperial Valley, we're getting something in the southwest area, and that's good for Mexicans. 300 jobs and 2 million, and I think the corporations that have and the investors are doing a good job. Finally, I hope that we get those good jobs in the administrative, because that's what I'm going to be looking for. And I hope they do hire local people. We have qualified people here, ladies and gentlemen, and we're Americans. We're highly educated. But we came from the salt of the earth. Blood, sweat, and tears, and like Jim Harmon said, my life has been bittersweet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oscar. Okay, please vote.
Hey, wait a minute. Go ahead. I've got a question for someone from the project, please. Is there anyone from the project? Jesse? On the project that was intended for the Mayflower Canal,
Yes.
that's currently being farmed by Mr. Slater, is that correct? Has that site been abandoned?
We are, yes, the decision has been made to relocate the project, and there's discussions to put a permanent conservation of that project site to keep it in ag in perpetuity.
Okay, and so the projects are going to be moved. The projects are going to be moved north near the. Is that the Midway to Bannister line?
Correct. There's one project called the Sonora Project that would interconnect to the Midway Bannister line, and the project that was the farthest south is a project that is being I can almost say abandoned, and it's being moved up north.
Okay.
M line. The M line. The other two projects are interconnecting to the 161 kV M line.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, is that it? Okay, please vote. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 16, additional funding for attic insulation program.
Move to approve.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I have a question for Sabrina.
And propose.
Good afternoon, Sabrina Barber, Assistant Manager.
Thanks, Sabrina. I think I've asked this of you before. As we're moving forward to fund some more money into this program, I just wanted to check with you again that the program is meeting all the requirements that the IID staff and protocol and policy is putting on it, and staff is comfortable with funding this and moving forward with this additional.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Would you make sure that this program is regional?
Yeah, in fact, we met with two of the representatives of Summit, both requesting that we change the eligibility criteria, the requirements to qualify for the program, so that they could reach additional residents within the city of Calexico. And we've asked that before we take a look at any of that we recognize that the city of Calexico itself may be getting saturated. However, we have the entire rest of the service territory. As it exists right now, we've, as of April 2nd, we've had 414 applications, 267 of those being within Calexico. So it gives you a pretty good idea. The other, we have 75 in El Centro, and then it drops significantly with 39 at Brawley, and then the others kind of spread along the other cities.
Okay.
Sabrina, I spoke with Trish McNeese over at the chamber.
Okay.
And she says she hasn't gotten an email. If
Okay,
you can
let me follow
email
up on
her
that.
so she can email her
Sure will.
companies. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Please vote. Thank you. We'll move on to legal number 17, adoption of new ethics policy covering all ID employees. Vance Taylor.
Thank you, President Memville and members of the board. Vance Taylor, Assistant Counsel and Ethics Officer. At the March 13, 2012 board meeting, I presented the attached draft ethics policy as an information item for the board's consideration. At that meeting, the board directed that the policy be revised to include protection for those employees who report ethics violations. So I revised Part Q of the policy to provide that the identity of employees making good faith reports of ethics violations would be held in confidence to the extent possible. I think I undershot that a little bit. I spoke with the general manager yesterday, and he had some concerns that the language wasn't strong enough. And having it read back to me, I quickly came to the same conclusion, and I took the liberty of revising the language to make it a little bit more robust so that we'd have better protection for the employees. If it please the board, would it be okay if I read that proposed language? I'd like to propose a new definition, that of a protected disclosure, and that would be any good faith communication by an employee that discloses or demonstrates an intention to disclose information to the district that there exists a violation of this ethics policy or associated law. And to Section Q, compliance and enforcement, I've added the following language. I'll actually read the preceding paragraph as well so you have context. It shall be a violation of this policy to fail to cooperate with or to interfere with the ethics officer in the performance of his duties under this policy. Moreover, retaliation against the ethics officer by employees shall not be tolerated. Accordingly, it shall be a violation of this policy to retaliate against the ethics officer for any reason associated with the application or enforcement of this policy. And this is the new material. Likewise, no employee that makes or cooperates in an investigation of a protected disclosure shall suffer harassment, retaliation, or adverse employment consequences as a result of that disclosure or participation in the investigation. Any employee who retaliates against another employee for making a protected disclosure or for participating in an investigation pertaining thereto shall be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination from employment pursuant to this policy and policy number 4350. Moreover, the ethics officer shall make every effort to maintain in confidence the identity of those making protected disclosures.
I'll make a motion to approve with the additions.
I'll second.
Before you vote, are the microphones working again?
Nope.
No.
I just want to commend the ethics officer. I didn't have to write. I know. No, I didn't have to write anything. I asked him to fix this, and he did.
Appreciate it.
You did a really good job, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is there any?
Thank you.
Is there any comments from board members? Any comments from the public? Please vote.
Who made the second?
It was Director Hanks and Director Desert. Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 18, which is going to be information. Has to do with Carl Still is going to handle this. It's the approval of the lease agreements with the Southern California Public Power Authority related to exploration and future development of geothermal resources within Imperial Valley. Carl.
Yes, in 2010, IID in December 2010, IID signed a MOU for geothermal production for 50 to 200 megawatts of energy in phases with SCAPA partnership. In that partnership, LADWP is a 50% participant. IID is a 32.5% participant. Burbank is 9.5%, Glendale 4%, Pasadena 2%, and Colton 2%. And this MOU is for the exploration of lands looking for geothermal resources. IID is committed, and all the other agencies are committed to only the first phase. After the first phase, there is an opt-in or opt-out portion of this MOU. Our budget for the exploration process was $10.8 million plus the annual leases. IID's portion at 32.5% is $3.5 million plus our portion lease cost. The land was at $100 per acre per year. The leases are set up in a primary term, 3 years for exploration. And the reason we gave that 3 years is so there was sufficient time to explore and to protect your exploration investment. If resources are found, the exploration triggers a secondary lease term of 35 years, and the reason 35 years, it allows us to put a facility in place and reach the useful life of the asset over a period of time. Originally, LADWP committed 2,950 acres, but they've since added another 160-acre parcel for a total of 3,110 acres. IID initially committed 2,280 acres, and that's in lease 2, which needs to be executed. That's in the agenda. And then IID is requesting that we and recommending that we add 1,884 acres to this MOU. That is lease 3, and attached to lease 3 is an amendment to the MOU taking the affected lands in lease 3 and tying them into the memorandum of understanding. In the amendment also is a right of first refusal for lands contiguous to the property of the 1,884 acres, and it's for the protection of reservoir if resources are found. And in that right of first refusal, it's written that IID must be involved and it must be a relevant project phase. The royalty structure is set up on this MOU is 4% of the total energy production cost, which is generally higher than most of the royalties that are out there right now. The lands that are affected, and if you're looking at it, the LA properties are these green properties up in this northern area around the north part of the Salton Sea. The originally committed properties are along the Salton Sea right here. Now this is the Worcester Wildlife Area that is abutting those. We have one more piece of property that's right up what's that, Marina Road out there? Yeah, Marina Road out there by the station on the highway. The lands that we're requesting that we add into this for exploration purposes is this deep purple section. There's 1,884 acres. A portion of that is dry. Some of that is underwater. These are one portion of the lands that we took back from Salton Sea. When we originally set this up, those lands were not available. The reason we're asking those to be added is we believe that those are very good geothermal lands and they would reduce our risk of exploration. Why would we be looking at that? In 2010, we commissioned a due diligence study for geothermal. We had that study updated in December of 2011. It basically looked at our costs versus the cost of developers that were out there, the cost of PPAs that we saw, took some averages and put those costs up and did a study on that. They're saying that basically if we did a public partnership, explore, build, and operate, the cost would range from $79 to $94 depending on the risk and what we ran into. The general average of PPAs that we were seeing, and this is somewhere with a 10% ITC, we're running about $137 levelized. And then if we had a option in there in year 10, if they had an ITC and we had a purchase option based on a formula for valuing a property at the end of year 10, it ran from 102 to 111. Those options and those costs compel us to start looking at the exploration process. However, in the MOU, we have what we call a due diligence function that gives us 1 year to look at that iteratively before we make a final decision on that project structure. Right now, we just want to proceed with the exploration process. So that project structure could change depending on the economics, because the economics, if Congress passes or funds the ARA funds the ITC, PTC, that could change. So, we've trying to give ourselves an iterative look. The other thing that we're looking at is, as Kevin alluded to earlier today, is a northern transmission strategy. Kevin, did you want to speak to that, or do you want?
The only thing and I know the board's already factoring this in, but this resource that we're talking about grafting on to the established land holdings of 1,884 acres, I think by all accounts it's the best resource for geothermal potentially in the Imperial Valley, and it would be a mistake for us not to try to build in a transmission component. So these urban partners, as off-takers of this energy, that's a good thing. But as we discovered in the earlier action taken by the board to the south of us, we need something to shore up our northern flank. And our transmission initiative, which is contingent on executed PPAs, is, for all intents, stalled because the PPAs haven't come. We believe that the next wave, the second wave, if you will, of PPAs will be for baseload, and that will be geothermal resource. And there is intense interest in this property from the private sector. I don't believe it's IID's place to decide winners and losers in the private sector, but I am cognizant of the fact that this is a special resource out there. It's a very hot resource, and it demands some level of expertise. So the reason that this item today has been changed from action to information is so that the board can take more time with it and consider it. But you should know that LADWP and SCAPA, and we're joined today by Randy Howard from LADWP. He's sat here patiently to get to this place in the agenda. But it is a time-bound issue, and the only way that we can ever get to a decision point or a commitment on transmission is to establish the resource. So go ahead, Carl.
Randy, you want to say a few words? Randy Howard is the Director of Resources for Los Angeles and Planning for Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. He's been working on this project since its inception. His responsibility is fairly huge. So, Randy?
Thank you. I'm not even going to try to speak into this. I've watched too many people try. President Menville, directors, I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words on behalf of LADWP and the SCAPA participants. I have been involved in this for quite a long time. I do manage all of our transmission planning development activities as well as our generation. And so this is a key project for LADWP and the SCAPA members. If you were to look at our integrated resource plan, we have fit in 300 megawatts of geothermal. We think some, if not all of that, could come from this area down here. Sitting listening to the board today, I could have been at my board meeting today in LA because it was going on at the same time. I could have just closed my eyes and I could have been there. We're very similar board meetings, and you have some very challenging issues before you. The difference in this structure and what's been put together with the SCAPA members is in this structure, IID invited the SCAPA members down. LA came down, bought some land, was looking to develop its own geothermal. IID came and said, why don't we do this together jointly? Why don't we jointly own and develop to minimize some of the risks that you see with private developers and some of the issues that are coming up for potential bypass? In this case, IID still controls a lot of the activity going forward. They're a large participant in the project. We put a voting level in there, so it takes LA and IID to jointly move anything. We also put the provisions, this is initially an exploration. We've agreed, all the other cities involved have already approved. We're ready to proceed with exploration. We're ready to put funds into drilling, and then we would come back, sit down, review all the data, come up with a tactical plan on how do we think this should best be developed for all the parties involved. And that could still be a private-public partnership. It doesn't preclude any of that. We will look at it at that time, as Carl pointed out. We know the tax incentives are expiring, the federal tax incentives that might have made it much more interesting to do this with a private developer. Those are no longer going to be available.
What's the deadline for those to expire?
I'll look to our private developers, but 2013.
December 2013?
So we have lobbied hard, though, in Washington. I just came back. We are lobbying for extension of those. We think it's the right thing to do. And at that point, if something were to come back in line, we think there's good opportunity with the private developers, and that's not going to be precluded here. What we're talking about is minimizing the risk, going out, identifying the resources that are available. At the same time, then we can look at what are the transmission options that we need to be considering before. As you know, LA came in early with the SCAPA participants. We worked on Green Path. We did a lot of studies to build transmission jointly out of here. We put that on hold. We needed to develop a little bit more on the resources. We needed to ensure that there were resources that would fill that line as well. We had some other issues that we've continued to work our way through. So the structure is different than other projects that you've seen with private developers. But you have another opportunity. Upon completion of the exploration, prior to doing any development, we will all go back before our governing authorities, including this board, with project proposals on how we would best develop this for our ratepayers. We know there's economic downturn down here. We know you have low-income customers. LADWP has 280,000 low-income customers. The cost of this development is important to all of us. And we think the model that we've put in place has the best opportunity to bring the lowest cost to our ratepayers as a joint project. LADWP stepped up early and said, we'll take these lands, we'll put them in. We do have other lands. We've continued to look for opportunities of land that we could put into this project. So we have bought other lands. And we think there's good opportunity for solar. If we can get the geothermal developed, we think in a transmission out, and we think there's good opportunity for solar. So on behalf of the partners, we ask you to take the time and really consider this issue. We do seek your eventual consideration and approval to allow us to move forward, and as stated, we're all ready to go. We have the funds budgeted, the SCAPA project team is well in place, and we're ready to move on the exploration activities.
All right, any questions for Randy on the board?
In the model that is being presented here, What is the option for development of minerals in the area?
So the development for minerals is a viable opportunity, and I'm not extremely familiar with that, but we did put the provisions in the lease agreements. So depending on where the minerals were extracted, there would be a potential for development and royalty interest of the owners of those lands. So if those minerals were coming off of the LADWP portion of land, there's an opportunity for LADWP to draw a royalty interest. But we certainly are jointly interested in any economic value or benefit that could come out of this development.
Well, one of the things to keep in mind, the piece of property that we're talking about is, I call it IID land, but it was land that was purchased through a bond program by the water department, paid for out of the water rates. And so whatever plans moving forward, there has to be some consideration given to that department and an approval from them. The other aspect on the minerals, so in terms of if there was a production of those minerals, I don't see where there would be a shared interest with the partners in that. I think that would probably be a private venture. So I think in terms of looking at this project, this is not a ordinary piece of ground. It's not the ordinary mix. And I know I've struggled with this thing for months and looking at this. I think we're missing something, both from the public side and from the private side. We know that there's a lot of renewable energy being produced. It's not base load. And I think there's going to be a big problem hitting the utilities in the face here real soon. And I think they're going to have to start looking at base load. When you're talking about backing up the intermittent loads, if the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, well, you're going to back it up with more fossil fuel projects. I think there's some type of special place for geothermal to be the backup for all this renewable, stand by itself, something thinking outside the box that benefits the ventures. And here I look at it from the public utility, because we need the transmission lines out of here. But at the same time, it also offers a tremendous opportunity for not only the geothermal energy business, but the minerals. For those of you that have been keeping up with it, from the reports I've heard, the mining royalties to the landowners may be equal to about 4 times what geothermal is, the energy part. So that's a big consideration. But at the same time, what is the best value for a base load energy? Are we getting, as partners, are we getting the best bang for the buck? The private individuals investing into a tough resource out there. I mean, that is a tough place to do business. Are we getting the optimum value of what we're trying to accomplish? To me, that base load, and if it's used to back up all alternative energy or into the grid or in some capacity, has a great value to us. And I think we're missing something along the way. I don't know what it is, but
well, I think one of the great benefits of this model is the combined SCAPA participants and membership represent close to 20% of the state's population.
Yeah, but let me stop you there. Not one of them offered a PPA down this way. Not one.
Well, I can tell you LA DWP attempted to do a PPA and do a solar project, and if it were not for having clear access for transmission, it would be built today. And I would tell you today that we continue to move towards that direction, and this certainly gives us that ability as a foundational platform in which we could do more.
And on the other side of the flip coin,
Sure.
we have ratepayers, we have a rate structure, a portfolio that we try to maintain and live within, and that is difficult with some of the renewables. You know, we have to be real careful which ones we meet. Otherwise, we price our rates out to the roof. So in the decision that this board has to look at, it's not just the transmission. That's going to be a big part. It's not just the jobs and the development. That's another big part. But we also have this component of looking out for the ratepayers. What is, and sometimes we have to weigh that value of our electricity rates against the benefits of jobs. That comes into play also. So this is a tough decision, and I'm just putting it out there because personally I've struggled with this thing, trying to see how it fits, make it work, and I just don't see it fitting yet. You know, I've had numerous conversations with both sides, but to me, you know, at some point in time, you're going to see everybody come looking at this resource, and if we from a political sense, you saw what happened with the solars. If we need allies, then we have to weigh that in. What is the value of SCAPA? What is the value of LADWP? But at the same time, we have private individuals that have put their money on the line here, put their integrity on the line, and went and drilled holes where other people said you shouldn't drill, and hit a mother lode. And this is right next door. You know, so, you know, there's a lot of factors, and I just want you guys to be aware that those things, I know they're going through my mind, and I just assume they're going through the rest of them and making this decision which way to go. And so this is going to take some time to fill in all these gaps, and I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, and we appreciate that, and that's our recommendation. We don't want you to bifurcate that decision at this point. We want you to take the time to really consider that. And my only point as to the amount of customers that we have is we're coming to the table with the load. We aren't an entity just coming to take a lease without an off-taker. We are the off-taker. So we have that ability right off the bat to bring the funds to the table with the load that needs the energy. That's a unique position to be in, and that's a very different structure than what you've been addressing previously on other items.
That's been very difficult for us here.
Yeah. And as to, you know, LA DWP did come down early. We've bought land in the Salton Sea. We bought land in the Nyland area. We came in early on Path 42 with a reservation. We are ready to move forward. And again, the commitments now, all the city councils have approved the MOU, and they are ready to commit the funds to move forward. So I just make that known.
Okay, does anybody else from the audience want to comment on this issue?
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Trim from Brawley, California. It appears that the Imperial Irrigation District is considering the possibility of involving itself in direct activity of developing geothermal resources. It is my opinion, that of which is shared by many, that this is an area that the Imperial Irrigation District should stay away as far away as possible. The only thing that the IID should involve itself within this area would be the following: limit itself to that being a landlord and nothing more. Be a facilitator of projects on behalf of those companies which have proven records of developing geothermal resources. Companies which not only have the expertise, but also have the private financial resources to take on these very expensive projects. In addition, the IID should limit its activities to that of a customer acting in the best interest and on behalf of their ratepayer base, in which they would negotiate the best possible rate of the electricity produced from those established geothermal companies. The IID should work only with proven performers of its most valuable geothermal resources. The IID should not involve itself in an activity which places a tremendous amount of public resources at risk. Let the developers develop and let the IID purchase that of which has been developed at the best possible rate for its customers. Has the IID taken the time to create a comprehensive business plan in the development and operation of this resource? The who, what, and wheres regarding drilling, operations, and royalty stream? How will the proprietary technology be accessed? Where is the experience? Where is the expertise? The IID doesn't need to take on a potential monster such as this. In the end, the questions that need to be answered are, is this in the best interest of the Valley? Does the potential reward outweigh the potential risk? The answers to both are no. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trim. Go ahead. Come on up to the podium. State your name for the record.
My name is Jason Turner. I'm the owner of Performance Mechanical Contractors out of Holtville. We just finished up the Hudson Ranch 1 project. We were the general contractor for the entire project. And just to give you a quick background, we've been in business since 1998. And our three clients are the three big powerhouses down here in the valley in geothermal anyway. It's Ormat, Cal Energy, and Energy Source. And prior to starting my business in 1998, I've been around geothermal quite a bit. My dad used to be the maintenance manager out at Cal Energy for a lot of the plants. So he take me out there quite a bit. Very familiar with the industry. I don't know if I consider myself an expert, but I definitely consider myself someone that's able to take a look at this report and say that I'm fairly embarrassed that the IID's logo is on that report. We just finished a project, a 50 megawatt project, 49.9 megawatt project, and we're going through lessons learned. We're cramming the numbers. We're fitting them where they all landed. We're looking at it, and I'm thinking to myself, I had a lot of different feelings. Number one, why Scapa? Why Scapa? Here, Cal Energy had that land for many, many years, and sat on it, and you guys took it back for a reason. Took it all back for a reason. Those sections anyway. And then now we're going to get, now you want to hand it off to somebody that's never done it. And again, are we waiting again? Here's another cycle. Right when Energy Source was catching traction, somebody down here is catching traction and doing something. And what are we telling the whole geothermal community here in the valley? What are we telling them when we go outside here? So I've got to bounce it around because I don't do this a lot other than in front of my employees. But we employed 300 people. There were 300 people on that site for about 6 to 8 months. I hear all these other numbers of 300-400 people but you only have a peak period for so long. We had about 300 people out there, and I looked at the numbers the other day, and 200 of those were local employees with a payroll of almost $20 million. That's just here in the valley, from a little company out of Hopeville. That if Scapa gets this, or not just Scapa, anybody outside of the Imperial Valley with our current developers, we have a very, very, very long shot at getting any of the work. All you have to do is Google their website, take a look at their RFP policies, and the RFP policies say you need this type of balance sheet in order to handle this. Well, we don't have that type of balance sheet, and quite honestly, we're probably one of the larger contractors in the valley, and so I would say that hardly anybody in the valley has that type of balance sheet to wrap a project, to be an EPC, whereas the private sector in the Imperial Valley, who most of the team in the roster are all from the Imperial Valley, found a way outside the box, so that David could be Goliath, and that we can go against the system. And that's how that plan got built. There were hurdles all the way back from 2005, 2006, all the way through. And they found a way. They didn't have to go to I mean, with all due respect, they didn't have to go to the public every time something came up. You guys know the headaches of all that. They were able to sit down and make a decision. Say, let's go this way, let's go that way. They were shifty enough. I'm just asking you guys to please consider the people that live next to you, the people that go to church with you, the people that you eat at restaurants with, the Imperial Valley people. These jobs, we only look at the $200 jobs during construction. That's nothing. Our business has, I mean, there was 10 years, 11 years that we haven't built anything in the Imperial Valley, triple flash-wise, flash plant-wise at the Salton Sea. Nothing at all. But in those years, we made a living off of plants that were built before. And so in the 20 years, 25 years, those plants, as they maintain them, I mean, nobody talks about those numbers. The impact of those plants is huge. So there's a lot at stake, you guys. There's a lot at stake. There's a lot at stake. I looked up all my employees and other employees that we use as subcontractors, and they're all from your districts. It goes from one end all the way down. And it's going to be very difficult for all of us, including myself, to look at my employees and our geothermal community and say, hey, look, we didn't do more. I mean, that's how I want to end. I don't want to end pointing the finger at anybody. I want to point the finger at myself because I haven't taken the time to educate you guys on what I know. So, and if there's anything that I can do to help this whole process, that's what I'm for. I'm all for development. Heck, if Energy Source or anybody else gets that property, they don't do anything, get them out of there. We want people in there that are going to get in there and develop. And I'm speaking for the I'm speaking for the people that are at Windows C at unemployment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Jim, you going to speak? Sure. I don't think, is there anybody else in the audience that wants to speak on this issue? Okay, Aaron and Mr. Grogan.
You can hand those out.
Then I'll bring it back to the board.
I have a few slides. I'm just going to hand them around, and then I'll just speak to them. They're pretty simple. First of all, I commend IID for pausing and reassessing the strategy on how you move forward. It's a complicated issue. You have a tremendous transmission challenge ahead of you. We also have, in this case, a geothermal development challenge that, we need to solve. We need to solve it right. I'd like to go through a few relevant facts on the 1884 acres, which is really the heart of the question. First of all, it's within what is known as the Salton Sea known geothermal resource area. That's a resource area boundary that was established years ago by a bunch of geologists and early developers that said, hey, here's where we think the very hot part of the resource up in that part of the Imperial Valley exists. Outside of that, it's most likely significantly different. Unocal, magma, drilled that area. Matter of fact, Dennis Down sitting in here probably drilled most of the wells. Found that it was very hot. It was also very salty. It has some very significant complex chemistry that you don't see in other geothermal resource areas in the world, except for just a couple of places. This is the only one in the United States. This is the most robust resource in the United States. It has the highest degree of certainty for long-term generation, unlike the geysers up in the north, which you're probably somewhat familiar with. The silica chemistry in this resource is not well understood except by a handful of people. You can't find a lot on the silica chemistry in this resource in the literature. You don't find it in textbooks. What you do is you find it in a few people that spent the last 30 or 40 years trying to figure it out. And they're the ones that got the plants operable that are now Cal Energy and resulted in all the new advances that we've incorporated into Hudson Ranch 1, which is now commercial and selling its power to SRP. There are substantial subsurface issues up in that area. As most of the farmers in the area up there know, there's a lot of CO2 in the ground. The CO2 also presents extreme challenges for drilling. It presents extreme challenges for actually trying to tame the brine and actually produce power in the steam that comes out of it. CO2 in the ground also is a very corrosive ingredient for any kind of a geothermal production or injection well. If you don't build it out of the right materials, you don't build it with the right kinds of cement in the right intervals, you can have a serious mishap out there. And unfortunately, serious mishaps in that particular geothermal resource turn out to be extremely expensive. Drilling a geothermal well is inherently risky. It requires a lot of specific knowledge. When you get into the Salton Sea, that specific knowledge is even more specific than it is in other areas in the Imperial Valley or other areas of the United States. It is not something that you do just like you drill an oil or a gas well. It is vastly different. We've seen downhole temperatures and pressures, downhole temperatures up there that typically can exceed 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Downhole pressures or pressures at the surface that greatly exceed 500 psi. In fact, John Featherstone and some others around 1990 drilled a well on Red Island. That well hit about 730 degrees Fahrenheit. It was still going up. The pressure was climbing. Unocal decided they better shut it in because they didn't want to fear a well blowout and have it end up emptying into the Salton Sea. That well is now plug and abandoned. That just goes to show you the exciting nature of the Salton Sea resource, but also one of the severe extreme challenges that you have when you want to drill that. Constructing a geothermal plant, especially one on the Salton Sea known geothermal resource, with no process design knowledge is a real extreme risky venture. I mean, it's tough enough building a geothermal plant on a resource that you know a lot about. It's even tougher when you're on this resource. If you don't have the design knowledge, you cannot put together detailed drawings to build the plant, much less have any chance of starting it up or operating it. That design knowledge is not readily available in the public. You cannot go find it in the literature. You cannot go to a Bechtel, a Shaw, a Washington group, which is Shaw is the old Stone and Webster. You cannot go there and find a plant design for the type of plants that have been found to work on the Salton Sea resource. It is not available. So even if the district, LADWP, drills a well out there and finds that there's a resource, what are you going to do with the data? There's no place to go with it unless you can find somebody that has that knowledge. Now, I know most of the people, engineers and scientists that have direct experience on the Salton Sea resource. Matter of fact, a good portion of those people are sitting here in the audience. They all work for Energy Source. The other portion of those people, we just got them out there still working today. Now, just a comment on Randy's comment on they've been working on this for a while. Some of you know I used to work for the district, and I was involved with Randy back in 2006, 7, and 8 when we started putting this whole thing together. So I have a lot of knowledge, and I was before the board, both in closed session and open session, on this issue. The focus at that point, and the focus of that original MOU, was not the Salton Sea known resource. It was the area to the north, the area that Carl showed you on that picture. The reason was twofold. One is you didn't have this area to deal with, number one. Number two is that it's an area that most everybody feels is outside of the Salton Sea resource. If the brine actually has heat and fluid, it's probably much more benign than the Salton Sea resource. It might be more like Heber, East Mesa, where you have very small salt concentrations. You don't have some of the significant corrosion issues. You don't have the high temperatures and pressures that you do in the Salton Sea resource. And we would have a much better chance of partnering up with somebody, building a successful plant, getting an operating team, and going forward. This resource was not included in that original MOU. Now, we're all for partnering up, trying to figure out how to solve this overall problem. And we're intent on working with the district, working with LA, SCAPA, to the extent that we can to make that happen. Because we have the knowledge to bring the geothermal portion of that to fruition. We also think that we would probably go in there, we'd save you the $10.8 million. We wouldn't drill a slim hole. We'd start off with a production well. But it's because we have a lot of knowledge on where to place the downhole position of that production well. We spent a lot of time and effort to gain that knowledge, and it is not readily available outside either. We drilled 3 wells. Director Hanks mentioned them. They're extremely robust. One's probably approaching 50 megawatts. One's probably better than 40 megawatts, and we have a little one at 20 megawatts. But they didn't happen by accident. They happened because of a lot of science, a lot of engineering, a lot of experience from a handful of people on how to obtain that. We'd like to put that knowledge and experience to work on this venture because we think it will help the district, it'll help the other SCAPA organizations be successful faster with less risk, and at the end of the day, less expensive than it would be otherwise.
Hey, Jim, let me ask you a question. Mr. Kelly, we have a 5 o'clock public hearing, so how do you want to handle this?
I'd like to come back to the board when we've had sufficient time to consult with SCAPA, LADWP, and members of the private sector, including Energy Source. But I do want the board to keep in mind that this transmission component is nobody is going to worry about that except you. And if our natural allies are limited to Cal ISO and San Diego Gas and Electric, then we have none. So what we do to the north will really determine what we do as a balancing authority.
So you'll bring this back, give us some time to work?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and then, Kevin, how do you want to handle the rest of the meeting? We got some other items here for about 5 minutes before the public hearing.
I think we go and we go over, but you try to dispatch these remaining items as quickly as possible.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you,
Okay,
Mr. Turner.
Jim, we're going to cut you off because, and I know Mr. Grogan and Aaron, did you have some comments or you're okay? Okay, thank you. We're going to move on quickly. We have
Local entity.
We have about a few more to go, so I'm going to, local entity, Vince. You have the approval of the 2012 local entity request. Let me just ask you, Vince, have all of these people on this list met the milestones?
That's the next item. The first one is the approval of the RFP for the non-competitive.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead of you. Well, let's jump to 21st of the approval of a local entity mitigation fees established by a 2010 competitive program. Has all of those people met the milestones?
On the request for funding, that would be a yes. Correct.
Okay.
But there are other issues that we need to bring forward besides just request for funding. There's some money coming back.
Okay, then.
Why don't we vote?
But we can
get it out of the way. It's just the forms. Let's get this out of the way. Going back to item number 19, I vote to approve.
Second.
Okay.
Is there anything else on item 19 that you needed to give us?
There was some.
The forms.
There are some additional forms for the fuel that were put in there that were not ready when we gave the information, but they're in the packet. One correction on the alfalfa seed, and then other than that, that's it.
Okay, any further questions on that? We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Any comments? Is there no one here? Okay.
Okay, item number 20, Vince.
Did it vote?
Yeah, we voted.
Yeah, we voted. That passed 4-0.
All right.
President Menville, if I can
interrupt. We have one IDC has asked that we hold their items for the next meeting. If you want to hold this whole item for the next meeting, you can do that as well.
Do that.
But yeah, why don't we do that?
Yeah, I know you guys have been waiting here all day.
Well, that's actually fine because we have other funding requests
Okay.
that have come in that are not on here, that we can do it in one big.
I would move that if we have to have a motion to continue this item for the next board meeting next week.
Okay,
But I am understanding that 19 is approved.
That's been approved.
Okay.
The forms and so forth. But this will bring it back at the next board meeting.
Very good.
Okay, is there a second to that? Okay, is there, please vote. Okay, thank you. Number 21, amendment number 1 to major work authorization number M0024, tailwater return system for Alex Jack. Yes, sir.
Hello, Mr. President. Sylvester Jones from the Water Department, Construction and Resource Area. Before you today is an amendment to Alex Jack Tailwater Recovery System in the amount of $3,978. The amendment was needed in order to protect the Tarfolio Interceptor embankment that runs adjacent to that TRS. We included additional rock or riprap protection for the embankment. They installed that, and this is for approval of that additional funds.
Right, and MWD is picking up the cost,
They're
right?
picking up the total tab for that. I think we went from...
To approve.
Is there a second? Okay, please vote. Thank you. Let's see, number 22, financial update, January 31st, 2012. Mr. Broking?
Yes, it's the January statements. Just a couple of comments. We've tried to add additional schedules to meet the board's request for more information on both energy and on the water side. It's still a work in progress, but I think we're getting pretty close to what the board's requested. And that's really all I have to say about the financials this month, I mean.
Any questions on this item?
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Acknowledge receipt.
Second.
Are there any questions? Please. Yeah,
Just
go ahead.
one. On the forecast net loss for energy, would you be prepared to go into more detail on that? We're just getting started in the year.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
On the projected net loss forecasted for energy,
yes.
Would you be prepared next time to break that down?
Yes.
What's causing that?
And in fact, in a couple of weeks, I'm planning on presenting a revised energy department forecast because of the recent activity in the on the renewable side. I'm going to incorporate that in a presentation. I think that's going to be on the 17th of April. But we'll also be ready to talk about the net loss at the next financial statement presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, please vote. Thank you. 23, adopt resolution declaring 50 vehicles as surplus.
I move to approve.
On that, please vote. Thank you. I guess that's it, the workshop.
Right at 5, right on the dot. You're doing good, Director Mendo.